Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful journeys of strength, resilience, and transformation. Today's story is about a woman who, after years of being overshadowed by her husband's deceit and manipulation, takes control of her own destiny. She uncovers a web of lies, fights back with strategy and precision, and reclaims the life she built. This is a story of empowerment, courage, and the profound lessons that life teaches us. Join us as we dive into this incredible journey of self-discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to begin today's story. I remember that night as if it were yesterday. The house was grand, beautifully lit, and filled with the hum of polite conversation. James and I hosted another one of our celebratory dinners for his colleagues, another property acquisition. Another evening of success. The room was filled with their laughter, clinking glasses, and their admiration for James's sharp business acumen. Yet, none of them knew the truth, that it was my work, my planning, and my strategy that had built the portfolio they were all toasting to. I kept a composed smile on my face, maintaining the role of the supportive wife, the one who played her part in the background, staying quiet and unobtrusive. James had poured himself another glass of wine and was casually chatting about our latest venture. He spoke of numbers, of acquisitions, and of investments that somehow always seemed to shine brighter under his name. I could hear the admiration in his colleagues' voices as they praised him for his financial brilliance. He relished in their praise, of course. But I couldn't help but feel a familiar pang deep inside. For years, I had allowed him to take the credit, to steal the spotlight, and to tell the world how he had crafted the empire that we now shared. He had always been the confident one, the one who spoke loudly and proudly, while I, in my quieter moments, made the plans and executed them. I had built the first pieces of our property portfolio long before I met him. I had structured our entire investment strategy, one that had catapulted us into wealth. But none of that mattered to James, who claimed all the credit, who took the accolades and wore them as his own. I often wondered if I had ever truly mattered to him, or if I had simply been a stepping stone on his way to the life he so desperately craved. That night, I noticed the usual familiar faces around the table. Samuel, our lawyer, always so composed, always professional, observing from a distance. He caught my eye for just a second, and there was something in his glance, a shared understanding. Perhaps he knew the truth. He knew what I had contributed to this marriage, to this empire that James proudly displayed. And yet he remained silent. As always, the professional keeping his secrets. There was a quiet empathy in his eyes, an unspoken understanding that was both comforting and unsettling. "Rebecca, you always seem so cautious with your investments," Connor from the bank remarked with a knowing smile. His gaze lingered too long, and I felt the uncomfortable heat of his attention on my dress. I didn't react, just sipped my water, keeping my face carefully neutral. The years of marriage had taught me how to wear the mask of the perfect, supportive wife. I was good at it now. James chuckled at Connor's remark. "Rebecca's still learning the complexities of high-level investing," he said, his arm draping possessively around my shoulders as if claiming me, as if the very act of touching me somehow made the narrative more convincing. His fingers tightened ever so slightly. "But she's making progress, though." The irony of it all was overwhelming. I had graduated at the top of my class in finance, while James had barely scraped by in business administration. My financial expertise had been quietly dismissed, my contribution swept aside for the sake of his ego. The dinner conversation felt like a charade I had played too many times before. Everyone praised James, and I played my role as the dutiful wife. But there was a simmering undercurrent beneath the surface, a quiet resentment, a quiet rage that had been building over the years. And that night, something shifted. As James continued spinning his version of events, claiming credit for everything that I had built, my mind wandered, my heart growing colder. I had become so adept at hiding my feelings. But this time, something inside me broke. After the guests left, after the laughter and empty glasses were cleared away, Samuel approached me quietly, his voice calm, but his eyes betraying a hidden urgency. "Rebecca," he said softly, "I need you to sign some paperwork. It's important." I followed him into the office. a knot of unease forming in my stomach. Once the door was closed, Samuel slid a folder across the desk. I opened it, expecting routine paperwork, but what I saw instead made my heart stop. The documents were property transfer forms. My name was being systematically removed from all of our holdings, replaced with James's. The transfers had been executed over the past 6 months, one property at a time. It was all dated, all signed, and all legal. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. James had been quietly, methodically erasing me from the very life I had built. My properties, my capital, everything I had contributed to this marriage was being taken from me. This was for tax purposes, Samuel explained, his voice neutral, but I could see the sympathy in his eyes. He had been my ally for years, knew the truth, and knew what this meant for me. I had to show you. I know the history. Rebecca, you built this. His words were a silent apology, one that I appreciated, but it didn't change the cold, sharp feeling in my chest. I couldn't breathe. My thoughts scrambled, trying to make sense of it all. How could he? How could the man I had loved, the man I had supported, betray me like this? Yet there was no time for tears, no time for anger. I had to act. My future, my security, was at stake. I closed the folder and looked at Samuel. I'll handle it, I said, my voice remarkably steady. Please, don't tell James about this. Not yet. Samuel nodded, his silence speaking volumes. He had done what he could. And now it was my turn. As I sat there, surrounded by the empty space that had once felt like home, I realized something profound. The woman I had been, the one who had smiled and played her role, was no longer the woman I needed to be. For the first time in years, I felt the fire of resolve burning within me. It was time to stop pretending. It was time to take back what was mine. As I left the office that night, my mind was already racing, calculating my next move. I would need help, of course. But most importantly, I would need time. Time to rebuild, to reclaim, and to finally stand up for myself. For once, I was going to be the one in control of my own destiny. The game had begun. The weight of the discovery settled heavily on my shoulders. As I walked through the house that night, I tried to steady my breathing, but a feeling of cold betrayal gnawed at my insides. James had thought he could erase me, remove my name from everything we had built together. But what he didn't know was that while he was out drinking wine and spinning his lies, I had been quietly gathering the strength to fight back. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk, my laptop open in front of me, methodically analyzing every document, every financial transaction, every email that James had sent over the past year. I scrolled through account statements, transfer records, and contracts, anything that might give me insight into the extent of his deception. The more I uncovered, the more the reality of his betrayal hit me. There were emails, so many emails. Emails with divorce attorneys discussing asset division. Emails with realtors about properties that would be ideal for bachelor living once he had cut me out. There were emails outlining the creation of separate bank accounts that I never knew existed. Accounts that James had been secretly funneling money into. I couldn't fathom how deep his planning had gone. For months, he had been setting the stage for my removal, systematically working to ensure that he would walk away with everything while leaving me with nothing. But what he hadn't counted on was my ability to think, to plan, to fight back. As the morning light began to creep through the curtains, I stopped reading for a moment and allowed myself to process the emotions that had been building up inside me. The anger, the heartbreak, and the deep sense of betrayal were all there. But underneath them, something else stirred, something stronger. I had always been the silent partner, the one who stayed in the background while James took the spotlight. But now, I could see the path forward. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming what was mine. And more importantly, about taking control of my own future. I sat there, plotting my next move. I needed to act quickly. But I also had to be careful. James wasn't stupid. He would be expecting me to react emotionally, to lash out in some dramatic confrontation. But I had learned over the years how to mask my emotions. How to keep a calm and composed exterior even when everything inside me was crumbling. This time, I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me falter. I called Samuel the next morning. I need your help, I said, my voice steady but firm. I need to set up a shell company. One that James won't be able to trace back to me. I need time, 2 months. Maybe less. And I need everything to be legal. Bulletproof. Samuel hesitated for a moment, clearly sensing the seriousness in my tone. Are you sure about this, Emily? He asked, his voice a mixture of concern and respect. Once we go down this path, there's no turning back. I'm sure, I replied, my mind already racing with the possibilities. This ends now. I won't let him get away with this. Over the next few weeks, Samuel worked with me to set up the shell company, a complex web of legal structures designed to shield my assets and keep them hidden from James. At the same time, I quietly started gathering information on James's investments, property acquisitions, and business dealings. I knew that I couldn't confront him just yet. I needed to outmaneuver him, to make sure I had all the leverage before he even realized what was happening. But even as I built my plan, I had to maintain the facade of the loving, supportive wife. The act was exhausting, but I had become so good at it over the years that it felt almost natural. I played my part, asking innocently about our investments, pretending to care about the deals that James was involved in. He was so confident, so sure that I was still the same naive, financially ignorant woman he had married. He never questioned my sudden interest in the business. In fact, he was thrilled by it, convinced that he had finally succeeded in teaching me the ropes. I allowed him to believe that. After all, every word he spoke, every move he made, was one more piece of the puzzle I was carefully constructing. But behind my polite smiles and carefully crafted questions, I was preparing for the battle of my life. And James had no idea. As the days passed, my sense of urgency only intensified. Each new discovery about James's schemes added fuel to the fire inside me. And with each piece of evidence, my resolve strengthened. He thought he could take everything from me, the life we built, the investments I had carefully curated, even the love and trust I had given him. But what he didn't know was that he had underestimated me. For the first time in years, I was finally going to fight back, not with rage or impulsiveness, but with strategy and precision. I met Samuel again, this time in his office. The walls were lined with books, all neatly stacked and filled with legal jargon that I couldn't always understand, but trusted him to navigate. I was prepared to take control, and I had a clear vision of what I needed to do next. We have to act fast, I said, my voice calm but firm. James is too confident. He thinks I don't know what's happening. He doesn't know that I've already started. Samuel raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. You've been busy, he remarked, a hint of admiration in his tone. I'll set up the necessary meetings. We need to ensure that everything you're doing is airtight. And we'll need legal cover as well. Are you ready to go through with it? I nodded without hesitation. I'm not going back. It's time to take everything from him that he's taken from me. I could feel the cold determination in my words, the emotionless calm that had taken over me. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to James's betrayal with grief or anger. I was playing the game. And I was going to win. We worked quietly and methodically. Samuel connected me with a financial advisor who specialized in shell companies. And together, we built a complex structure that would ensure my assets were protected. I knew that once I started moving, James would notice, but I also knew he would be too confident in his own success to realize how much ground he had already lost. Meanwhile, I started feeding James small doses of information that I knew would keep him distracted. I asked him questions about the property deals, showing a keen interest in the things that I knew would trigger his ego. I pretended to be the wife who was finally catching up, the one who wanted to understand the complexities of high-level investments. He was thrilled, of course. He always had been, believing that if I simply understood, I would let him keep his control. But what he didn't realize was that my questions were carefully crafted to give me the information I needed to break him. One afternoon, when James was out meeting with clients, I took the time to review the accounts again. This time, I focused on his offshore accounts. The money he had been quietly stashing away. Money he thought was untouchable. I had suspected its existence for months. And now, I had the proof I needed. The offshore accounts were just the tip of the iceberg. I found the evidence of his financial mismanagement, how he had been siphoning funds from properties we co-owned, redirecting them to his own personal accounts. The worst part? It wasn't just his own personal funds he was playing with. It was the money we had earned together, the money I had helped him make. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to move quickly. That evening, I texted Samuel, letting him know I was ready. The documents I had prepared, account statements, property transfers, and the damning evidence of financial fraud, were all ready to be put into action. It was time to start the next phase of my plan. And I wasn't going to wait any longer. As I reviewed the final details, I realized something that almost made me laugh. All these years, I had played the role of the supportive wife. The one who let James take the spotlight. Let him feel like the king of his empire. But now, I was the one calling the shots. Now, it was my turn to step into the light. The next morning, I felt more focused than ever before. There was no turning back. James would never see me coming. I was about to take everything from him. And he wouldn't even know it until it was too late. I made the call to Samuel to confirm our next move. Let's make sure everything is in place. When he's distracted, we strike. His voice was steady, and I could hear the approval in it. It's time. We've got this. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I was already in control. The game had started, and now there was no stopping it. The first confrontation felt like it was happening in slow motion. I had spent weeks, even months, preparing for this moment, quietly watching James go about his life while I built my plan in the shadows. All the while, I maintained the facade of the loving wife, the woman who knew nothing of the games he was playing behind my back. But now, the mask was about to slip, and I could feel the power that had been so quietly building inside me finally come to the forefront. James had no idea what was coming. He had continued to take the credit for everything, from the properties we owned to the wealth we had accumulated. He spoke of his empire, of his strategies, and how his investments had turned everything into gold. It was always the same story, him in the center, me in the background, as if I were nothing more than a side note in the narrative of our lives. But as I prepared for the next step, I realized something profound. The man I had once loved, the one I had supported through every decision, had never once truly seen me. He had always thought I was just the wife, the woman who played her part without asking questions. The irony now was that it was I who had built everything he claimed as his own. And it was I who had the power to take it all back. The final stage of my plan was simple yet devastating. I needed to confront him with the truth that he could no longer deny. For months, I had quietly gathered evidence of his fraud, his lies, and his calculated betrayal. I had it all. Emails with divorce lawyers, secret accounts, property transfer forms with my name erased. The worst part was that I hadn't even seen the full extent of it until recently. James had been playing me for so long. But now the tables had turned. It happened one evening when James came home later than usual, as he often did after a long day of pretending to be the man in charge. He walked in, his face tight with exhaustion, and tried to kiss me as if everything were normal. But I was no longer the woman who would let him pretend. I stood, waiting for him to realize something was different. I've been thinking, I said, my voice calm but laced with the weight of everything I had uncovered. About our investments. His eyes lit up, thinking I was simply showing more interest in his work. That's great, Emily, he said, trying to sound supportive, but there was a nervous edge to his voice. I'm glad you're finally catching up. It's a complex world, but you'll get the hang of it. I wasn't interested in discussing the details of our investments. Not anymore. Actually, I was going through some documents. I continued, deliberately laying the property transfer forms across the coffee table. I found these in your office. The look on his face was priceless, surprise mixed with a flicker of panic. He went pale as he recognized the documents. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm. James, I said slowly, why have you been removing my name from our properties? His jaw tightened. It's just consolidation for tax purposes. He stammered, clearly caught off guard. I see, I said, keeping my voice even. And why have you been speaking with divorce lawyers? Why were you looking at bachelor properties? Why is there an offshore account with $3 million in it? He tried to brush it off. You're overreacting, Emily. It's not what you think. I've been making moves for the business, securing things for us in the future. You just don't understand. I understand perfectly, I replied, my heart racing. But I kept my expression steady. You've been planning to leave me with nothing. And you've been stealing everything we built together. He looked like he was going to say something, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, he let out a frustrated sigh, his eyes narrowing. You don't get it, Emily. I built this. I have the connections, the strategy. It's all me. No, James, I said, my voice suddenly strong. You may have made the moves, but I built it. I was the one who found the properties, secured the capital, and structured everything. You just took credit for it. And now, you're trying to take it all away from me. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was trying to find a way out, trying to salvage whatever he could. We can fix this, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. We can make this work. I never wanted this to happen. You can still have everything. We can still be partners. Partners? I repeated, a small, bitter laugh escaping my lips. You're a thief, James. You took everything from me. And now you expect me to help you? No. This is over. I'm done. I turned and walked away, not looking back. There was nothing more to say. The truth was out, and it was clear to me now that I was the one in control. I had taken back my power, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, as I prepared for the next steps, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I had finally freed myself from the chains of a life I had been living for years. I wasn't the silent wife anymore. I was the woman who had built her own future. And nothing, no matter what James did next, could take that away. As the days passed, the whirlwind of legal battles and financial maneuvers finally came to an end. James's empire, built on lies and deceit, crumbled before him. The bank had frozen his accounts. His investors had pulled out. And the regulatory authorities had already begun their investigation into his fraudulent activities. He was left with nothing but the ruins of a life he thought he controlled. For me, the victory was never about revenge. It wasn't about watching him lose everything he had built, even if it felt like sweet justice. It was about reclaiming myself, my identity, and my worth. I had spent too many years in the shadows, playing a role that wasn't truly mine. Now, I was free to be who I had always been beneath it all, strong, capable, and unapologetically powerful. With the final divorce papers signed, I stood on my own, a successful businesswoman in my own right. Artemis Financial, the company I had founded before meeting James, now stood as a beacon of everything I had built. I had taken my power back, not through dramatic confrontations or vengeful acts, but through strategic planning, patience, and resilience. As I watched the city skyline from my office, I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that I was no longer afraid. I had learned a profound lesson in the past year. Never underestimate your own strength. Life has a way of revealing your true power when you least expect it. And sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most beautiful victories. To follow more inspiring life stories and lessons, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Your journey to empowerment and self-discovery starts here.